Beerus is not a villain. That is a sentence that I see pop up very frequently, whether it be in comment sections of videos, or forums, or Reddit, or whatever. Whenever someone talks about Beerus being a villain, there's always someone who will comment back and say, well, he's not really a villain. And I would argue, like, currently, yes, in the series, he's not a villain. He is fighting alongside the heroes, or at very least, he is on good terms with them, and he doesn't pose any type of immediate threat to them. But in Battle of Gods, and in his arc, the Beerus arc of Dragon Ball Super, he's most definitely a villain. He is the antagonist. He is the active threat to our heroes, to their lives, to the entire planet, But because he's not necessarily evil, people give him a pass and say, oh, well, he wasn't really a villain. And I think the separation comes for people in this fandom because, most Dragon Ball villains are just evil through and through. They are just selfish, maniacal bastards who are out for their own, and they don't have any type of higher purpose to their actions. Where Beerus, he isn't malicious, he isn't cruel, he's just kind of above it all. He's more of a neutral player, and something as like wiping out a planet and just wiping out an entire race of people is nothing to him. It doesn't even register him as something morally good or bad. And though this all may be true, not being evil doesn't mean you're not a villain. Some of the greatest villains in fiction aren't characters that you would necessarily call evil. A great example of this is Magneto from the X-Men franchise. He is clearly the villain for the X-Men. He is like the de facto villain of the X-Men. I mean, even the movies make that clear. He is the main villain of the X-Men. He does terrible, terrible things, but he does them with a sense of righteousness because he feels oppressed, against, the bigoted humans who treat his people like trash and just like they don't even deserve to live and that they're being hunted. So he's acting with a sense of righteousness, but, he's also committing horrible acts, which, the X-Men are standing up against. One could easily argue that Magneto is completely in the right, but he is still technically the villain of the story. Even though his actions aren't necessarily evil, he's doing them with a sense of righteousness to them. Another great example of a character that's acting with a sense of righteousness behind his terrible acts is Ozymandias from Watchmen. He wipes out an entire city's worth of people in the hopes of ending World War, to stop humanity from destroying itself. So it's one of those, the benefits outweigh the negatives in this situation. And in his mind, he's the hero. In fact, you could argue that he has like a higher moral stance than the actual heroes of the story, who are just kind of sitting back and watching things just go to shit, where he is actually taking action. Yes, he's taking horrible actions, but he is taking actions for, in the long term, that will help mankind and, better society. Think of like great villains who do terrible things, but only because of the fucked up situation they're in. Another comic book example, Mr. Freeze. He needs to, steal and rob things so that way, he can power his suit, and he's doing all these things so that way he can get the medical research needed to save his wife. He is a horribly tragic character, like a lot of characters in Batman's Rogues Gallery. These characters are all villains, but, you can argue that, from a certain point of view, they're not actually evil. They're just in a fucked up situation that forces them to commit terrible acts. But they're still villains. They're still 100% the villains of the story. So then why does Beerus get that free pass? Well, like I said before, in Dragon Ball, all villains are just through and through evil. They are just straight up bad guys to the core. And Beerus really isn't. He's not evil, he's not malicious, he's just not really a great dude. He's just kind of an asshole who's really powerful and just has, no value of human existence or planets or anything. He just doesn't give a shit because it just doesn't register as anything that's worth giving a shit to him. But at least within the confines of his introductory story, whether it's the movie or Super, Beerus is a villain. No ifs, ands, or buts. He's a villain. If Magneto's a villain, and Ozymandias is a villain, and Mr. Freeze is a villain, if all those guys get stamped with the villain tag, then so does Beerus. He does not get to stand above all that. So hopefully people can stop arguing about this and stop making these fucking accusations that he's not a villain. It's like, no, he's a villain. He's a villain. Just cut it out. He is a villain. Or at very least he was. Alright, that wraps up everything I had to say for this video. Until next time, guys, Xeon, out.